is in the study where they had teachers sit and watch videos of kids in a classroom, and they wanted them to notate the number of infractions that they saw. And the punchline is that there were no infractions. They actually just wanted to see who they would call out, right? The study was actually eye tracking software. So it was watching where their eyes were going, and they were all putting their eyes on the black boy. There was a mix of kids. So they were watching the black boy for infractions, which means that they would see all the infractions if he committed any, which he didn't, and they would miss all the other ones because their eyes were on him. What was so interesting to me about that study is it was the black teachers too that did it.
It is Freedom Friday and you are still not free.
It's Freedom Friday and you're still not free, but hopefully you'll be freer after this hour with Sharif, Ish, and me. We are back again. It's another Friday, and here's the deal. I'm at war with this thing I call the belief gap. The belief gap is the difference between what our kids are capable of doing and what the adults in their lives think that they are capable of doing. It is a war. I've been at this for at least 10 years because I named that concept, not myself, but I took that concept as the name of what I wanted to fight in terms of education. If we could just get the way that we think about our kids right, I feel like so much will change. Well, this is what's a problem for me. I'm on TikTok a lot, and because I'm on TikTok a lot, I come across a lot of teachers, and there are two strains of teachers on TikTok. One strain of the teachers on TikTok are the ones who come on and they use it as a platform to give you tips, like how to help your kids, and math tricks and homework stuff and advice. Stuff you can use. The other side of teacher TikTok is not that positive. It's negative. It's where teachers come to vent and to say things that I feel contribute to the negative narrative about our kids. And that for me is unforgivable. It is an abuse of your teacher license, in my mind, to come on a platform where there are millions and millions and millions of people and contribute to the negative narrative about our children, knowing that that impacts public opinion about our kids, and public opinion impacts what we do in policy. So I just think it's inexcusable. We have three teachers that I want to get your guys' reaction to this time around. I have many to choose from, but these are the ones that I chose.
No shortage of
There's no
of
shortage.
these.
So let's go after the first one. This is a teacher who says that she can't out-teach bad parenting, is basically what she's saying.
No one can out-teach bad parenting. I can't out-teach what they're already learning at home. I can't out-teach tolerated disrespect. I cannot out-teach tolerated refusal. I cannot with a parent whose first instinct is not to point at themselves, not to point at their kid, not to point at the environment, but to point at the school. Everything is the school's fault. Nothing ever in the mirror is wrong. These things are learned at home. They're reinforced at home. And when they come to us, what are we supposed to do? My job is to teach. A parent's job is to parent. I don't want to parent. They don't want to teach. Unfortunately, teachers don't have the time to teach because we have to parent. We have to control a classroom of 30 kids when a quarter of them aren't even parented at home. In order for me to successfully do my job, a parent has to do their job at home. But instead, I'm having to do their job instead of my job. We would just help each other out a lot if I could do my job and only my job, and they do their job.
So she just gave it to us as parents. She told us about ourselves. So educators, help me out. What are you thinking about this clip?
Listen, I blame her parents. I blame her parents, her parents, as well as whoever gave her a teacher certificate, And I mean, the one thing that I would, semi almost agree with is like large classroom sizes. But even that, I've seen highly ineffective instruction in small classroom sizes. So it's not just that. But this idea of parenting versus teachers, this us versus them, is extremely problematic. And I'm sure that's the type of energy she also gives to families, gives to students. And then just overall, starting with this premise that students come into these school systems always broken, always bad parents, always bad community, when so many of them, excuse me, came in fine. They were excited about school. They felt loved. They felt energized. And their experiences in classrooms of people like that is what, gives them angst and anger and frustration and basically disengagement, in a lot of ways. But the blaming parents, man, there's a level of contempt in that spreads, that feeds, that undermines learning and partnerships.
So Ish, let me ask you a question. You're at home, you're flipping through TikTok, you see this teacher and you recognize her as somebody that is in your care. She's like one of your teachers in some way. What do you do?
That I would argue is unfortunately uh, too much already embedded within the culture in too many places.
You ask her to go to the rubber room.
Yeah. Like, and even providing coaching, folks would have to be willing to engage in that like two-way street type of conversation and initiative in an authentic way. And there's examples I can think of where I've worked with other teachers around these type of issues to make sure that they're more culturally sensitive or whatever word that they're using in a given season, right? And it's kind of always reached that same issue. If the person feels like it's a disciplinary thing, they usually shut down and then like still put that blame on you. Like you're the barrier to this. You're not being realistic. That would never work with our kids, right?
With these kids, yeah.
Yeah. And see, Sharif got that right. Like, it's just like a
These
flow of
kids,
that.
yeah.
These kids, yeah. And in the video, she spoke in so much generalities. I'm thinking to myself, like, what does she even mean? Like, you need parenting. Like, can you define that for me? Like, do they need like a butt whooping in your mind? Like, what grade do you teach? Like, I heard kids in the background, like, was she at work? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, the point that she's trying to make with what she was even saying. And ultimately, if she can't explain that, it does unfortunately fall into the tropes, right? If I don't know what student population's in front of her, if she's speaking to this into like a diverse audience and like putting all the kids, lumping them all together like that, just shows like that lack of like true care around what she's dealing with in her job.
And some of it is just basic stuff, right? Like local parentis is in most, like the foundation of school, like it's in the place of parent. Like there's so there's, if you look at a Venn diagram, so much of teaching and parenting is in the same thing. As a parent, you are a teacher. And as a teacher, you are local parentis. You're doing some things in the place, you're doing some aspects of parenting, teaching, guiding, mentoring, supporting, coaching, redirecting, right? I'm like, what are you talking about, lady? You know what I
That's
mean?
being
Like,
a good adult. That's just being a good person.
and
You
you can be
know?
down the street as a community member. You're doing, like, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's, yeah. So anyway, some of the stuff that she was talking about, she's probably saying that's what parents should do. And then there's this line, so I can teach. That's problematic. That's problematic.
I would say she needs to be fired. And when I asked you, Ish, like what would you do if this was your person? First of all, because I visited so many schools, I feel like I know enough to not to challenge teachers. When they say, "You have you ever taught? Have you ever been in a classroom? You don't know my life, my struggle." What I can say back to them is, "You oftentimes don't know what the teacher two classrooms over is doing." So this idea that you somehow are an expert because of your one classroom and your little master's degree that you got. When I'm going to schools and I'm seeing one classroom where the kids are sitting and doing what they're supposed to be doing and having a good time, and then I come in your classroom and all hell is breaking loose in the same school, right? So this idea that you guys can't be challenged or whatnot, I would fire you. And I would tell every parent that if you ever flip through and you find this teacher and your kid is in her classroom, pull your kid if you can. If you have any choice to put your child into the safe harbor, a place where they don't have teachers who are coming online and adding to the negative narrative about Black children, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think that this is an attitude I see often about poor kids and Black kids and poor kids of color. That's the attitude I usually see. Now, the thing that strikes me as so crazy about this is I think her real thing here is a cry for help, because when she says, "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do if you don't do X?" Which tells me, okay, she's at the limit of her ability, her cognitive ability to know how to teach. She's not ready for a high needs classroom. That's a different type of person. You got to be
She
built
wasn't
different
ready
to
to
teach it. This
graduate.
is she wasn't ready to graduate, but I could see sending her to some low needs classroom where she only has 11 students or something. But sometimes, honey, this just isn't for you. This isn't the place you need to be. Not every doctor, we talked about this before the show today, not every doctor is meant to be in emergency rooms. So if you're going to be sitting up there complaining as a doctor in an emergency room that there's too many people coming in with too many needs and damn, they're having heart attacks all over the place. What am I supposed to do? Well, you're supposed to learn about heart attacks, dummy. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to learn about gunshot wounds because that's the nature of the game where you are. If you want to go into private practice or if you want to go into family practice in the suburbs, go do that. But don't sit and complain. Now, if I saw a doctor on here at night saying, "You just won't believe the type of people that keep coming into the emergency room," I would feel the same way. I would say, "Well, maybe it's not them because, you know, they are the patient." And I don't want to compare our kids to gunshot wounds, but I do want to compare our kids to needing highly skilled teachers that specifically know how to teach them, not ones who are going to complain at night. Do you guys think it's too harsh when I say, because I go on TikTok and I say this to them, I would fire you and I would tell every person in your care to remove their child from your classroom. Now they get mad when I say this.
Yeah, I mean, because you also got to remember, like in that, like I don't know if it was a cry for help, because for a cry for help, one, you actually need a level of humility. We could see that she needs help.
Mhm.
What she needs help with first is her mindset and her
Hmm.
level of
Hmm.
humility. That what that came across to is a level of arrogance. You didn't hear anything remotely saying like, "Oh, let me look at things differently. Let me try something different. Hey, how do you do X, Y, Z? How do I engage? How do I motivate?" Because teaching, honey, ain't just about teaching whatever's in the book. Because that's what it sounded like she wants to do. The biggest part of teaching is inspiring, connecting, engaging. That's the other part of pedagogy and instruction that people just forget about. They just think like, I'm like, if you want to play school like you used to play house, then that's a different thing. You line your little doll babies up and your Muppets, and then you're just talking to them, and they're sitting there obedient because they're Muppets. That's what she wants.
Now we know how old you are, Sharif, talking about Muppets. Man, when's the last time anybody saw a Muppet? You dating yourself, bruh. Um, well, listen, let's go on to the second clip, the next clip here. This is a first year teacher, and I want you guys to see this through the lens of your experience as educators and people that have to lead teachers. So take a look at what this first year teacher has to say.
I am a first year high school English teacher. This is definitely going to be my first and last year teaching. I was made very quickly aware of the fact that this is not the profession for me. It is absolutely astonishing and scary how your kids are 14, 15 years old and still do not have the proper reading skills. And I'm not talking about the ESC kids, the 504s, the IEP kids. I'm talking about your everyday regular Joe Schmo from Kokomo kid who does not know how to read and write at the level that they should. And the problem is that they don't care to learn how to do those things correctly. I can't teach the class because your kid wants to be a disruption, because your kid wants to be on their phone, because your kid does not give a flying about their education. The problem really, yes, the problem is your kid. The problem is also you as a parent, but the problem is also the administration who continuously makes these stupid excuses for these kids' bad behavior. Why in the world are you still talking about COVID? Every time these kids act up, it's always, well, they spent 2 years in COVID. So did everybody else. That was 2 years ago. At what point are we going to stop blaming COVID for these kids' bad behavior? At what point are we going to stop making these excuses for these kids? They are the problem. When you are stopping your teacher from being able to teach the entire class because you don't want to follow directions, that is a you problem. And the thing is, the teacher will always get blamed.
Gets my blood boiling.
Yeah, I
Right
can
there.
literally feel my blood pressure going up. I can't always because sometimes, but sometimes you can just sit there. You can feel it spiking.
I mean, what's your response to this is a first year teacher who's saying this is also going to be my last year? I have questions. How'd you get there? How'd you make it through the funnel? How do we not know that you had this attitude?
That part. Mindsets matter most, and we have to have a better screening process, right? Like not just the practice exams for getting in there. There should be some level of what's your what's your just competence, right? And I'm, to be honest with you, I'm sick of teachers being online talking about I'm quitting. Shut the and just quit. Like
You're
why?
right.
I don't get this need to just go announcing and bashing kids and families on your way out. Yo, bruh, do the old school. Write a letter of resignation. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a shame because it's not, there are other teachers who are actually working and trying. And again, I'm not saying this as some naive person and saying like, oh, it's easy. Teaching is easy. First year is easy. It's not. It's a challenge. But when you come in and you're already thinking like, oh, I don't care about COVID. And I'm like, COVID is just one aspect of what students often have gone through before they reach you. So even just like, oh, forget COVID, but you also mean to forget a whole lot of other stuff too, probably. And that is problematic. And again, what are you doing differently? Nothing. Everything is everybody else's fault. Like that part is bad, man.
You all are working on building up the pipeline of Black teachers, and this is a Black male teacher.
Hmm.
This is a Black male teacher that made it through college, made it through the induction and all that, praxis or whatever that stuff is. He went through some gates, and this is a Black male teacher, adding to the 2% of Black male teachers in public education. And
He might be also contributing to the dropout rate of 50%. So, you know what I mean? Like just because you brown don't mean you down with the art and science of teaching, like, but I often question like, okay, who were his coaches? Who prepared them? Like what, like for us, it's so important for students to go in with their eyes wide open, to have, and so when we did our site visit at Bieber last week, it wasn't just, talking about education and theory. They were also thinking about their own selves as students, right? Because we want them to kind of analyze and critique education and learning and how they're situated in it, and then what's their impact throughout it if they continue this journey. And so, again, like what does this preparation look like? What does this coaching look like? But anytime someone is like, it's their fault, their kids, administration, parents, and I'm doing great. Like that's anytime that is the algebraic equation, I'm just like, that's the source of some of the problem.
I mean, you can't even wait. You can't even give it a little bit more time. You've been there for 1 year. You're so arrogant and so professional that you don't understand that everybody has a bad first year. Your classroom management
I
practices are so
I
good in your first year.
I did have a bad first year.
Well, listen, I'll put it this way: it's not your best year. It's not the best year of
No,
your
it's
teaching
not.
life, right?
No, it wasn't
So
my
this
best year.
so this idea that I already have decided that classroom management is not a big deal. That it's the kids. It's the problem. The parents are the problem. Well, maybe the problem is that you don't know how to assess where your kids are at different levels and figure out what you're going to do to scaffold those kids in your classroom. And even if you don't come out completely successful, you made a try at it. You actually made you didn't give up in the middle of the year talking about the kids are the problem. What's so scary to me is that we do have kids walking into classrooms like this. That's what's so scary to me, right? Like when I talked about that other version of teacher TikTok where they're
Probably
coming on
millions,
saying,
bro.
millions, probably millions of kids walking. And it's not always, this is the thing that is because of TikTok. The thing that is starting to become so clear to me is that class is a problem because I am seeing black and brown faces that sound just like the white ones that they are mixing with and that they are caping for, and they are saying some of the most negative things about our kids too. Now, this is my time to bring up this study you guys have heard me talk about before. Is in the study where they had teachers sit and watch videos of kids in a classroom, and they wanted them to notate the number of infractions that they saw. And the punchline is that there were no infractions. They actually just wanted to see which who they would call out, right? The study was actually eye tracking software. So it was watching where their eyes were going, and they were all putting their eyes on the black boy. There was a mix of kids. So they were watching the black boy for infractions, which means that they would see all the infractions if he committed any, which he didn't, and they would miss all the other ones because their eyes were on him. What was so interesting to me about that study is it was the black teachers too that did it. My bottom line is I feel like there's a class problem too. We just watched a white teacher and then we watched a beige teacher. Now let's watch black teacher. This guy got millions of views on
Did you just say beige teacher?
beige. I'm Bayesian, so like I'm king of the Bayesians. So yeah, yeah, I'm Bayesian American. So yeah, so we had white teacher, then a beige teacher, and now we're gonna have a black teacher. So let's listen to him. And this isn't his whole clip because he goes on and it gets worse in his own clip. But this is someone stitching his clip, and we're just gonna do like a couple of seconds of her responding to what he's saying. But let's see what he says.
I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are. I'm gonna just say this: I teach 7th grade. They are still performing on the 4th grade level.
But that same child is fresh to death. Jordans in every color, brand new iPhone. When they can't spell the I or the damn phone, they can't count, okay? Don't know they ones, they twos, or they threes, they A, they B, or they C's, but they know every rap lyric. They know Cardi B this, they know Migos that, they know Tupac this, but yet they can't spell Cardi or B, okay? It's the parents. It's the same parents that was out getting BBLs when the pandemic was here. It was a true epidemic with the BBLs, but when school supplies came around that year, they didn't have no money. It's the parents. You wanna know why these kids are still learning on a 4th grade level? Because it was the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade that the teachers was telling the parents.
Man, she's brutal some of this stuff makes your heart, stomach, and head ache. Ache for our children.
These are the people that we're putting our children in care of. The thing about the belief gap that I learned years ago was it's not a teacher thing, it's the adults in your life. That's why I say it's the difference between what your kid is capable of and what the adults in their life are capable of, because it's not just teachers. She's not in the classroom and
No,
she's
adjacent,
concurring
yeah.
with this teacher. She's adjacent, which tells me that there's a black child in the universe that has a teacher like him and has another adult in his life like her. That child doesn't have a fighting chance at a healthy intellectual development, in my mind. What do you guys say, though? Let's start with the teacher. Now, he went on he was the one who in a previous video said your kids are dumb as hell. And there was a few things that I was clocking about this video.
And he still had a job.
He still had a job and got millions of views. And listen, if he can be offensive about our children, I can be offensive about him. So number one, let's just start with this. There's a certain affect that I have noticed across some of these teachers. There's a certain way of behaving and saying what they're saying that I find really problematic. And the eyes back and forth thing and the I'm too cute for this thing, maybe you shouldn't be teaching black boys because you got the wrong attitude about them all along. I'm just going to say it. I need to be provocative about this. Let me also say that your English and your diction is an embarrassment. You better not be talking about these kids like this, talking the way that you're talking. I clocked about 18 different grammar problems in the way that you were talking. And you in another video are talking about how our kids don't even know their colors, don't even know their shapes. And I didn't show this one to you. In his video, his other video, he actually has the camera in the classroom and he's showing you how dumb the kids are in his mind. He's asking them questions and they're getting it wrong. And he's doing it to put it out into the world to embarrass them. Right?
Man, that level of contempt for other human beings, for students that already have tremendous barriers that they have to overcome, and instead of you being there like, okay, how am I going to support, motivate, inspire, and most importantly teach well and effectively, you're spending mental energy and I guess what he would call creative skills to embarrass and really undermine their intellectual capacity and abilities and their aspirations, right? And so to have, the fact that he was able to make a second and third video or however many he's made without, that I do blame school administration and his colleagues, because someone in that school saw that. That brother would have been in my office and we're like, hey, you know what? This is your last day here.
Tell me how that conversation would go.
Oh, it was just like, hey, you know what? Can you explain to me what was your purpose of doing this video? Like, what did you expect to get out of it? What were you trying to get? Because first I want them to like critically think and be in a position to, no, let's look at this and you explain to me What motivated you to do it, and what did you expect to get out of it? Are you expecting to get like better student outcome results? Are you expecting families to just say, "Oh yeah, we're going to support you"? Like, what exactly were you trying to get out? So that's the first question I would ask.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and then after that, I would also just slip them the paper of like, "Hey, this is, we're going to find someone who can, and you know what? And later on, we're going to send you what." I wouldn't actually do this, but we've been in situations not that drastic, but where we're like, you know what? We don't think you're the right person to lead this particular classroom. And having someone else come in that did have the right heart and mind and skill set, and get radically different results. I didn't see this whole series, but The Wire, the one joint that I saw was when the guys, they were walking in the hallway and they see one classroom and kids are just like not disengaged, disruptive, and they go down the hall and go to the next classroom. And I was like, you know what? This is the clip that should be really analyzed, because that is America's schools. Those same kids are going to other people's classrooms and are leaning forward, getting work done, engaging, getting smarter by the minute. Like this is not a fairy tale. This happens in all of these schools. And I guarantee you it's happening in, well, I don't know their schools, but most schools, there's someone, even the ones where you're like, oh man, that school, there's someone who knows how to teach, knows how to reach, and are killing the game.
You know
And
what,
down the
though?
hall, someone else is just complaining and just talking garbage.
Well, two things. Number one, the favor I would ask of you two, because you are so well connected, if I would tell you to bring these clips into any adjunct professors that that are having any type of hand on teachers. Bring these clips into that level and say, "Don't do this. Don't be this person." The second thing I was going to say was, I don't know this to be true, but I'm biased because of the TikTok thing. It does seem to be not veteran teachers. It seems to be millennial teachers. It seems to be a lot of millennial teachers. I don't see a lot of the older, more veteran 5 and 10-year teachers.
I was like, I'm sure there's some veterans. They might not be able to do TikTok as well as you. But there's a, just like we talk about in a positive way, there's an intellectual, cultural, spiritual genealogy. There's a negative genealogy that people learn from as well. I remember as being a new teacher and a veteran teacher telling me, and I was shocked, but she was, I thought she was joking at first. Later, I realized she wasn't. She was like, I don't even like kids. And I thought she was, I'm just like, well, you're a teacher. Like, what does that mean? Like, and then, I realized she was serious and my heart broke. I'm 21, but to hear someone say that, and then when the kids weren't respecting her later, when I became a teacher leader and I was able to like observe classrooms, because I hadn't been in her classroom, I'd only see her interactions in the halls. Later, when I was able to observe, I was like, she doesn't like kids and they know that and they don't like you back, which is a natural human reaction. It ain't because they poor or this or that. That's a natural human reaction.
So Ish, you're visiting a class, you see one of these teachers, and then later you come across a TikTok like this and you know them personally. What's your conversation like with them?
Sure. If I knew the person personally, I would definitely give them a call immediately that evening and have a conversation with them about like even why being in teaching is something that they're pursuing to begin with. I think sometimes people go in with not realistic expectations of what teaching is, because regardless of the situation you find yourself in, a lot of times most students, right, are struggling in reading and writing. And you should have came in there with eyes wide open about the situation in which you're dealing with. And for me, it sounded like, especially the last two brothers, sound like some fake ass dudes that say like they're part of the talented 10th type nonsense. That also like this snobbery about like the gatekeeping of knowledge is a very Eurocentric Urugu type framing of how they're even like talking about the kids, and then even anti-blackness that permeates our society. Now, obviously, you just can't call someone out and be like, you're being anti-black, right? Well, I mean, we should. But also at the same time, that should have been already an ongoing conversation if those people are your colleagues and you are engaging in this kind of like truly professional dialogue about what it means to actually be in front of students and teaching students. If not, he'd be like an associate periphery type dude to begin with that avoids such conversations. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you called out a part of what I feel is class too, like the talented tenth, the snobbery, the bouginess, I got through it, and here I am, and all these dumbass kids in my classroom. What I wonder is just like a couple things, because like, listen, I'm mad about these things when I see these. Like, I get fiery mad. It's infuriating, and knowing that we have so many of our kids during their intellectual development years are in the care of people like this, rather than being in a freedom school type of environment where someone has engineered the entire process so that it is conducive to Black children learning. We have thought about how our teachers get here, and who we pick, and who we select, and how we rate them, and how we train them, and how long it takes them to have their own classroom, like how much they have to go through before they have their own set of kids. What curriculum are they using? How has it been vetted? What practices are they using? How have those been vetted? How much of this is like, when in medicine, we try medicines on different types of people, but we exclude some. So we try medicine out on all white people, and then when we give it to Black folks, we don't know whether or not it's going to have the same impact on them or whatever. And sometimes we find out the way we're treating them is different. The same thing with education. So if you had to think of a school for Black children from the ground up and design it just for them, it would be the opposite of this. I don't know where these guys came from. I don't know where they got their education, their college training. I don't know how they passed the tests. I don't know why they have children in their classrooms. I don't know who's going to find them on TikTok and then go and talk to them and be like, so here's the other thing too. I just heard you use the word professional. Um, in my mind, I'm starting to think that professionalism is a white supremacist construct in this one way. I think we need to start being uh, unprofessional and say, that's bullshit what you just said, and you shouldn't be teaching. We need to stop with all the niceries, because we have 8 million Black children who are having their brains diminished by putting them in classrooms like this. Not just classrooms, because that classroom exists not in a vacuum, but a classroom exists in a system of classrooms, a system of a school of a system of district, a district of a state. So you're one part of the system, but you are a bad part of it. And anyways, my unprofessional thing is I've lost my patience with, can we talk about this? Because I'm gonna cut to the chase. There's no reason for you to teach Black children. Let's just cut to the chase. I don't think you're redeemable. I don't think that there's any remediation for you. Now, for some of y'all, that's going to sound harsh. That's going to sound terrible. But these kids don't have a year to rewind. If you're in fourth grade and you have a fourth grade teacher like this, you don't get fourth grade back. If you're in fifth grade and you have a teacher like this, you don't get fifth grade back, right? Every year that you're not in a freedom school, for instance, you've been robbed a little bit, I think, culturally, spiritually, and whatever. Anyways, I'm gonna let y'all beat me up on that point if you want to.
I
Push me
don't know.
back
I
on
don't
it.
know.
I'm
I
saying
don't
we
know
should
if
be
this.
unprofessional.
Yeah, and I
Unprofessional.
don't even look at that
So,
as unprofessional. I mean, I think being direct is absolutely critically important. I do think there's a lot of wishy-washy people beating around the bush. I like, that when there are things that are happening, to me, that's crisis mode. That's crisis mode. And the more crisis, you have to be very direct and get the attention, you know. And I think that's important because people need to understand like the level of gravity that these kind of the mindset has, and it's not only. And when you have the mindset, this is what we share with our youth as well as when we do professional development. It's not just when you're standing in front of that classroom; it's before you get there. It's how you plan, the questions you think of, the materials, the level of rigor. The self-reflection of how am I going to be better. All of that happens. We call it like the intellectual preparation. If that's already saturated with anti-blackness, with contempt for the communities, with disregard for the just human growth and development of a child, which is one of those basic 101 courses that you start with, then man, the kids don't stand a chance once you actually are in front of the classrooms. And this is why, like Bobby Greg Carr talks about freedom school. He's like, one day, wouldn't it be great if we could just drop freedom and this is what be school would be like altogether? This is the type of experience, like how they experience freedom schools around this country. Imagine if that was their 180-day
Mm,
experience instead
mhm.
of their 6 to 8 week experience in the summer. We'd be in a radically different place.
I think that's so true. I think that that's the main strategy here is that people don't see that and they haven't seen that. And I imagine a lot of these teachers that the reason that they get under my skin is that they speak with such authority, but they haven't seen the other side of this. Many of them haven't been to a school where they see people succeeding with the same kids that they're calling out. Many of them haven't been on some of the trips we've been on. You guys have been in schools, but I've visited schools across the country that are doing different things. They're not all
Amazing
the
things.
same. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing things. So I feel like these teachers didn't get to see it.
Well, and often they'll say, "Well, that's not like our kid. That's not like our kids," and that's why even in the school or in that district or in that city, it's so important. But when we when we talk about like educators are often siloed, there's layers to that, which means not only they're siloed, they're like, "Oh, I'm not getting help." It also means that they don't have sight into who's being successful, who's doing well, who's with those same students who are coming from the same struggles with the same type of parent. Because remember, generally, you got four types of parents. You got the permissive, you got the laissez-faire, you got the rigid, then you got the neglectful. In general, right? Like we're since they're generalizing, let's generalize. There are four. To describe them all as just neglectful or permissive is wrong, right? But the way they describe it, and as you said, all the attention that it gets, they're like, oh yeah, these are parents, these are poor parents. Da, da, da. But when the other thing is, my mother used to say when I first started teaching, she's like, beware of the teacher's lounge. And what they have right now is a platform. They've just taken teacher's lounge toxicity and are promoting it, worldwide, about the same. Because she used to say like there was the places that she heard anti-blackness the most was often in the school's teachers lounge, and people would sit there and talk about black kids and black parents and communities in such a way, and that was a safe zone, that was a safe place to do that. Now they have their social media. And the other part, I do want to I want to make sure this isn't decoupled. Educator prep writ large is problematic as well. So one, tens of thousands of dollars, 4 to 6 years. Most, even when I was with Department of Ed, 69%. And the study that Temple and some other universities did not too long ago, up to 70% said they weren't prepared to teach at all, any type of kid, when they came out of their ed prep program. Any type of kid. You add on to that, one of the other questions got to if they're culturally, racially different, that number spiked even higher. So that level, and also reminds me, we talked about that book, Up South, before, by Matthew Countryman. It's the same thing even outside of classrooms. That whole classism thing that you talked about, when we were talking about the Great Migration, and you had Black people here, Philadelphia and elsewhere, that were already established and looking down and like, we don't want them. Fannie Lou Hamer, what they say, like, send her, back to Mississippi. That mindset is pretty pervasive in schools and outside of schools.
Oh,
How we
let's just
think
stop there for a
about
second.
people.
Let's just stop there for a second. Because I feel like that story is worth telling just briefly. For people who just heard that story about Fannie Lou Hamer came up to New York to create what is called creative tension with the Democratic Party. She wanted to come up from Mississippi because the Mississippi delegation of the Democratic Party was abusing Black folks there and not allowing them to be seated. So she came up to New York to come to the convention to make news, and she did. But what the president did at that time was go to Roy Wilkins at the NAACP and tell the black bougie intellectual black folks in suits from the North, take care of her. And Roy Wilkins said about her, someone needs to go to tell that ignorant woman to go back down south. This is Roy Wilkins at the NAACP, who has buildings named after him, by the way.
Civil rights legend.
Civil rights legend. But the real legend is her. The real legend, as it turns out, fewer people know fewer people know him than Fannie Lou Hamer now. So what if Roy Wilkins is the teacher in the classroom and Fannie Lou Hamer is the student in the classroom? What if that's the dynamic? You are missing the greatness. That woman left a mark on civil rights more than he did. She was smart. She was clever. She was strategic. She was tough. She was plain spoken. She could say a lot without needing all the $60 words and whatnot. And people understood her and they followed her.
Plain. She
made it plain and they followed her or whatnot. So imagine that's Leadership. The student. And imagine Roy Wilkins is the nation of bougie, classist teachers that even look like our kids that are saying what he said. He said somebody needs to tell that ignorant woman to go back home. Go back down south, right?
She doesn't belong.
I didn't mean to stop on that one, but I think
I think that's real important because that's, again, back to mindsets. It permeates society, and often, as you said before, students of color, particularly poor students of color, that's what they're subjected to in their existence, right? Because, like you said, it's not just in that classroom. It might be multiple. You get to middle school. You're seeing multiple teachers a day, right? And then times 13 years. That's the thing, 13 years. And imagine the little kids who don't quite have language for how they're being treated, but they know their full humanity isn't being respected. So as they're going from pre-K and moving up, there's something that they just feel like they're developing a chip, but it's really a defense mechanism.
It's really really a sign of
like
health.
A survival mode, right?
It's a sign of good health.
It is.
It's a sign of mental health.
They're pushing back on oppressive systems.
Absolutely.
And oppressive mindsets.
That's right.
And adults who are like negative about them all the time.
Having been one of those students, and that's why I'm going to say this, having been one of those students in my own lifetime, in my own history, I will tell you right now, I was very healthy. I was healthy because I understood that these folks were discounting me and didn't appreciate me. And they thought I was dumb when I knew that I was relatively intelligent. And that marred a lot of my school experience. So here I am now, actually, with the platform. And I said this at your thing, Sharif in Philly. I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Grace, who told me that I was one of the most ignorant Negroes she ever met and that I would never be anything. So Miss Grace, listen, I'm something and you're dead. So let's just keep it at that, right? Let's just listen, that's how life works out. That's how life works. Anyways, we have one.
Listen, a lot of folks who did great things had somebody, tell them, and this is different than the young folks saying, you hating on me, right? Like that real hate, like that's real hate what you experience, and I don't want to be ageist or whatever, or biased against young folks, but sometimes the critiquing like we're doing these young folks, this ain't hate. This is genuine feedback about what you're putting out into the world. And we're reflecting back and saying, this ain't it, homie. This ain't it.
Well, I mean, that's because we're caring for the patient more than the doctor. I mean, we're saying a lot of other jobs are play. This ain't play. You've got 32 kids in a classroom whose futures are on the line. And the world already thinks enough bad stuff about them. When they walk out of this classroom, they already got everybody thinking that they're problem, they're broken, they're corrupt, they're somehow deficient. They're either genetically or culturally or some kind of way from birth, they are bad. So why would you participate in the creation of more of that narrative in the world? Even if you feel all these things that you're venting and saying, why get on a platform and put it on steroids out into the world?
Because I blame millennials I blame millennials for all of that. All the speak my truth. And yes, queen, say you're like, I mean? Like I blame millennials for the madness,
Not the yes queen.
Yeah, yes, queen. Like, no, that was some BS. Like, no, queen, no.
I mean, we can also say the young, the older generation, like dropping the ball, passing off that wisdom.
We ain't taking no responsibility for the madness.
Well, listen, this is where I would say the older, because I'm Gen X. So I would say that the boomers had some problems and millennials had some problems. I just say that Gen Xers were the ones that kind of held us all together and kept us sane. So, anyways, speaking of younger teachers, we do have one more clip, and I want to play this clip because it's a little bit different than the others, but this is a younger teacher also. So let's see what she has to say, and we'll round out with this teacher. And we won't play the whole thing, but we'll play about 50 minutes or 50 seconds of it. So
we work in schools where the staff walk around not liking you because the kids like you. I thought that's what we was here for. I thought we was here for the kids. And it's no shade to everybody else, but the kids like people that look like them. And I'm not saying you can't be a bomb teacher and your kids can't relate culturally to you, but when they do, we in a cut. We're our twins. We need. At the end of the day, the kids like me so much because I handle my own business. I stand on my own business. I don't call a principal. I'm not calling the climate. Nobody's leaving on my room. We all in here for the 90 minutes and we doing what it need to do. I get that little Raheem getting on your nerves. And every time you call his mom, she don't answer. When you put him out, the admin don't do nothing. It's time for you to get with little Raheem. What's wrong? And I'm not saying beat Raheem up. What I'm saying is he needs some tough love.
See, she deserves a yes, queen. I didn't know. I don't know half of what she said, but I don't know what half of what she said. However, I get the vibe, and I know exactly
what she's saying,
what she's talking about.
Right.
Like
right.
You know what I mean? I know exactly what she's talking about.
She's saying I don't have the problems y'all have. That's what she's saying. I don't have the problems y'all have in your classroom.
Well, even if she does, she's saying that she's solving them, that she's the leader of the classroom and she's building a community that everyone is about. She's not sending them out like, hey, come handle this. You handle this. You go there. Somebody else handle this. She's taking away. She's saying, I don't take away my agency as the leader and the responsible adult of the classroom. It is my responsibility to build a community with a common purpose, a shared purpose, right? Because once students have a sense of purpose, and they know that you're not going to give up on them, it's a different part of the culture. And that's what that's what I took from Sis.
So Ish, do you get the good vibe from her?
Yeah, man. Right off the bat, you can tell like she's with the students, right? And participating in that dialogue back and forth intergenerationally, right? That is probably meeting the students in a way where they're actually, taking the steps out to be respectful, to hold each other accountable within the classroom. And you can just off the strength of that short clip, you can tell that's probably how that classroom orients itself, and then still getting to the work that needs to be getting to, right? And when we were talking earlier about like these different types of teachers coming in with those other types of frames, right? And class-wise and based on anti-Blackness and everything. There's like a spectrum of that. And I think working in a teacher prep program, the fact that many of the students I have, which is a grad school program, when they get in there, they're like, oh, I never thought of that before. It's like, you never thought of that? Aren't you in the class? You know what I mean? So it's true that like, sometimes folks are put in these positions unprepared and then like go off on this nonsense. But it's also true some folks are put in these situations and not given the tools necessary to be able to be effective teachers within the classroom. And unfortunately, that is most of the situation in which we're dealing with. So when I see a teacher like what she was just demonstrating, I'm just like, yes, like we need to clone people like that and put them in the classroom, because you can tell that she's dedicated to what the students and getting what the learning and expectations of education should be, while also by the exterior, you can say developing healthy relationships with the students.
So she's an advertisement for Grow Your Own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Grow Your Own teachers.
And the culture that she was describing made me think of like how we often talk about, collective work, responsibility, and accountability. It's like a family, like you put your kid in timeout, or do you kick him out of the house, as the middle schooler or high school, however they were talking about, just like, yep, you're out because you keep making these mistakes. Like it's teaching, you know what I mean? I'm like, you're an adult and you're still making the same, mistakes. But, You know that saying they say like wealth doesn't change you, it only reveals your tendencies. I think teaching is that as well. Even and listen, teaching is extremely challenging. It is y'all used to give me a lot of shit back in the day on 8 Black Hands when I would say like teaching is and they were like, what about astronauts? What about surgeons? I'm just saying like day to day overall, teaching is one of the most complicated professions out there. And to be effective, you're using so much of your brain power and your resilience and your creativity and your ingenuity. And I think the stress of teaching, it reveals what your values are. It reveals what your values are, right? Because and again, it doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes, but part of the reflection is the feedback that students gave us about our mistakes. How did they respond to the mistake, and what am I going to do differently? We didn't see that in the first 3 videos.
No, what I saw was zero self-reflection and 100% projection onto the child that you are a problem. You're broken. Your parents are broken. I can't do nothing for you. I don't know why you're here. I don't know why I'm here. And my bottom line is what you just said. Yes, teaching is it is a very challenging job that people should make light of. But because it's so challenging, you know that I'm not wrong when I say people are failing at it because it's a challenging thing to do. So when
And a
I
lot
see
of
you,
districts are desperate, right?
they just need bodies. They
Yeah,
just need bodies, and we need more than
you need
bodies,
kids? That's all right. We got a vacancy.
right. And so my bottom line on this, and this is what we could wrap with, is I want to keep challenging these narratives. I want to keep challenging these narratives because I think the negative narrative about our children is damaging and it hurts them. And I don't think we pay attention to that when we're participating in it, but we are. We are damaging them. Overall, it's not positive. It's not helpful to talk about our kids in this way. It's definitely not helpful when you're doing it with the authority of a teacher. When you are saying, I am a teacher, so trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Your kids are broken. That's a very toxic message to put out into the world. That last young lady that we saw there looks culturally closer to the students she's probably teaching. Her attitude was not, these kids are terrible, they're broken, and I'm not having any success. Her attitude is one of ownership. If I have a problem, I'm not sending my kids down to the office every 5 minutes. And that is something I want to say to you, teachers. I know you think because in your one little classroom that you know everything, but what you don't know is that if I were to ask a principal, which one of your teachers is going to struggle the most this year? Which one is going to send the most kids to you for discipline? Which one of your teachers is going to have the hardest time getting through the content for the year? That the principal oftentimes will be able to tell me with pretty good accuracy which one of the teachers is going to have those problems. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that I can ask a principal which one of you guys are going to have that type of problems and he will be able to tell me? It's because you're not all experts at what you do. And it's because many of you do need help and reflection and professional development. And part of that is you having the attitude and the humility to know that you need that, right? I think what I'm hearing in a lot of this discourse is I'm at the end of my abilities. I don't know what to do. These kids are overwhelming me. The challenges that they bring to the classroom are overwhelming me. That's what I'm hearing in your voices. So what I would say is if that's the problem, then if you had a kind of solution based way of thinking, you would say, okay, so I'm at the end of my rope right now with what's going on in my class. What's my next step? What do I do after I've admitted that? What do I do now? Um, who can I talk to about classroom management? Who can I talk to who has been through this exact same thing and has been successful at it, right? Because you have to know that there are people that have been in your position and there have been people that have figured it out. So, anyways, that's not to preach at people, but I'm going to defend students and parents because I think that this isn't a two-way conversation. I think we get to lambast young people and their parents, but we don't get that feedback to you. And I'm going to be that feedback loop for you as the educator because you're college educated and you think you're really eating when you're doing this. You think you ate in all of these, but you didn't eat me. I'm going to tell you every day of the week our kids deserve better than you, and you should be fired. And we should pull our kids from your classrooms until you get the appropriate attitude to teach our kids. See, we're not broke. We know that a whole bunch of people are making money off of our kids. We know that when we send our kids to schools, that there's an entire middle class network of people that are paying their mortgages on the backs of our children. So we're not broke. We're not here just to collect your criticism without any type of solutions or help. So we need to pull our kids from you and from the schools that employ you. That's my final word. Sharif, what would be your final word on all this?
Yeah, my final word is we need more teachers like that last one. And we need more professors who can prepare teachers in their ed prep programs and principals, to support, teachers, right? Because I don't even think a new teacher should have to go around and say, who can help me? The help should be there. The principal, if they can point out who needs what, that is it starts with the culture of the building that's student centered and teacher supportive. And how do we support our folks? How do we support our community? Because again, the classroom is just a microcosm of the school, right? And so the community, just like schools are microcosm of society or the community in the larger society. So how we support them, and this pipeline, what are the levels of supports and insulation that it should have from early on all the way through? We have college professors who can't effectively prepare educators. That's why I'm glad people like Ish are now starting to be, you see more like actual educators preparing the next generation, right? Like if part of our responsibility is train our replacements, we got to make sure that the replacements have the mindset to be effective with our educators and like who they are, what's their value-based work that will be revealed at a greater extent once they're leading classroom. Because at the end of the day, when you're teaching, you're leading a classroom. You're leading other human beings. So at the end of the day, this is leadership. And what I saw from the first three examples was poor leadership. In any context you can see it. Anybody that's leading a group of folks and would get on social media and talk about the people that they're leading without thinking about what is my place in all of the chaos and the madness, they are the essential ingredient to the challenges and to the chaos.
I love it. That's a good place to stop. Teachers, get right with yourselves. This has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you're still not free, but hopefully you're a little bit freer now than you were when we started with Sharif, Ish, and me. We'll see you guys on the next episode.